drums that play by themselves. What do they mean? The first beat came at exactly midnight, a hollow thump that silenced every insect and bird in the forest. The second beat followed 3 seconds later, impossibly precise, as if counting the heartbeats of a dying man. By the third beat, the villagers of Nbaro were already barricading their doors, pressing trembling hands over their children's ears, and whispering prayers that hadn't been spoken aloud in generations. I stood frozen on my grandmother's porch, blood turning to ice as the rhythm crawled beneath my skin like insects burrowing into flesh. The drums were playing again, drums with no drummers, summoning something ancient and hungry from the darkness between worlds. My grandmother clutched my arm, her fingernails drawing blood. "Kwame, come inside now," she hissed. "Those who follow the midnight drums never return as themselves." I should have listened, but the rhythm had already wrapped invisible fingers around my mind, pulling me toward the dense forest where no light penetrated. By dawn, I would discover why my ancestors feared the sound of drums playing themselves, and why some secrets buried in African soil should remain undisturbed forever. What I unleash that night now seeks new ears to hear its call. And if you're listening to this story until its end, it already knows your name. I returned to Nbaro village after 12 years in America, a place where education had stripped away my belief in the spirits that my grandmother claimed walked among us. With my psychology degree and plans for a research position at a prestigious university, I had become a man of science, of rational thought. The old ways seemed like quaint superstitions designed to explain what science now could. My homecoming coincided with the death of our village's eldest member, Okafor the drum maker. For 60 years, he had crafted the ceremonial drums used in our most sacred rituals. Each drum, villagers claimed, contained a piece of its maker's soul, channeling energies from realms beyond our understanding. Ridiculous folklore, I muttered to myself as I unpacked in my grandmother's small house at the edge of the village. Yet something about being back in Nbaro made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The air felt charged, as if a storm approached, but the sky remained clear, stars glittering like cold eyes watching from above. That first night, the village elders gathered to perform the burial rites for Okafor. I attended out of respect, but found myself checking my phone during their lengthy incantations. My grandmother noticed and slapped my hand. "You dishonor him," she whispered harshly. "Okafor's spirit cannot cross over without proper respect." I apologized to appease her, but inwardly rolled my eyes. When the ceremony ended, the village chief approached me. "Kwame, Okafor asked for you specifically before he died." "Me?" I was shocked. I barely knew him. "Yet he knew you. He said you would be the one to return his Nyama to the sacred grove." The chief held out a small, intricately carved drum, its surface covered in symbols I vaguely remembered from childhood. Protection sigils and binding marks that were said to keep dangerous spirits trapped. "What's a Nyama?" I asked. My grandmother answered, her voice trembling. "It is his soul drum, the vessel that contains the darkest secrets he learned from the other side. It must be returned to the sacred grove before the third midnight after his death." Or she trailed off, unwilling to speak further. "Or what? Or the boundary between worlds thins, and things come through," the chief finished. "Things that hunger for the living." I almost laughed, but something in their expression stopped me. They truly believed this. To them, this wasn't superstition, it was reality. "Fine," I said, taking the drum. It felt unnaturally warm against my palms, as if recently played. "Where is this grove?" "Follow the path behind the cemetery until you reach the split baobab tree. Place the drum in the hollow at its base. But remember, you must complete this task before midnight tomorrow." And Kwame, the chief, leaned closer, his breath sour with fear. "No matter what sounds you hear, do not play the drum. Do not even touch its skin after sundown." I promised, more to ease their minds than from any belief in the consequences. That night, I examined the drum in my room. Its craftsmanship was extraordinary. The wood seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the skin stretched across its top bore stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. The symbols carved into its sides seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles, creating the unsettling illusion that they were crawling across the surface. Just tricks of the light, I told myself, setting it on my bedside table. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to a sound that pierced through my dreams. A single, perfect beat. Then another. The drum was playing itself. Each beat synchronized exactly with my heartbeat, then gradually began to accelerate, forcing my heart to race to match its tempo. Sweat soaked through my sheets as I sat paralyzed, watching invisible hands press against the drum's skin, creating indentations that should not be possible. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The temperature in the room plummeted until I could see my breath clouding before me. In the corner of the room, the shadows deepened, coalescing into something that was almost, but not quite, human in shape. Then, as suddenly as it began, the drumming stopped. The room returned to normal, though the chill remained in my bones. I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a product of jet lag and the suggestible atmosphere of the village. The drum sat silent and innocent on my table. The next morning, I decided to complete my task early and be done with it. I placed the drum in my backpack and headed toward the cemetery without telling my grandmother. Science-minded or not, the experience of the night had left me shaken, and I wanted the drum gone. The path behind the cemetery was overgrown, rarely used. As I walked, the dense foliage seemed to close behind me, erasing my way back. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, and sounds became muffled, as if I were walking underwater. After an hour, I reached the split baobab, an ancient, massive tree torn down the middle by lightning, yet somehow still alive. Its two halves curved away from each other like hands opened in supplication, creating a space between them where nothing grew. At its base was a hollow large enough for a man to crawl inside. Darkness spilled from it like liquid, defying the bright afternoon sun. I approached cautiously, reaching into my backpack for the drum. It wasn't there. Panic seized me as I emptied my backpack onto the ground. The drum had vanished, though I distinctly remembered packing it. I searched frantically, then froze as a terrible certainty washed over me. I knew exactly where it was. Back in my room, playing itself again. I ran back along the path, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. By the time I reached the village, the sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. People were already locking themselves indoors, casting fearful glances at my grandmother's house. From inside came the sound of drumming, a complex, impossible rhythm that no human hands could create. I burst through the door to find my grandmother kneeling before the drum, which sat in the center of the floor, beating wildly. "What have you done?" she cried when she saw me. "The drum escaped because you failed to respect its power." "That's impossible," I began, but my words died as I saw what was happening to the drum's surface. The skin was bubbling, stretching upward as if something beneath it was pushing to get out. The wooden sides began to crack, leaking a thick, black substance that smelled of rotting flesh and burned hair. "It's midnight," my grandmother whispered. "The gateway opens." The drum exploded in a shower of splinters and putrid liquid. Where it had been stood a figure that defied comprehension, a thing made of darkness and angles that hurt the eye, vaguely humanoid, but with too many joints bending in impossible directions. Where its face should have been was only a void, ringed by teeth that spiraled inward forever. It spoke, not with sound, but directly into our minds, its voice like maggots crawling through brain tissue. "The pact is broken," it said. "The keeper failed to return what was borrowed. Now I collect what is owed." My grandmother threw herself in front of me. "Take me instead," she begged. "He does not understand our ways." The thing tilted its knot head. "The debt requires blood that knows the rhythms." His blood calls to us. It has for many years. Horror dawned as I realized the truth. Okafor, he was my grandfather, wasn't he? My grandmother nodded, tears streaming down her face. He went to America before you were born, learned forbidden rhythms from drummers who didn't understand what they were calling. He brought that knowledge back, contained it in his Nyamengoma to protect us all. You were supposed to return it, to close the circle. The thing extended what might have been an arm, ending in elongated fingers like blackened branches. You hear the rhythms in your blood, child of Okafor. You always have. The empty spaces between heartbeats where we whisper. The patterns in brain waves where we hide our secrets. With growing horror, I realized it was right. The drum beats that had haunted my dreams since childhood. The rhythms I found myself tapping unconsciously during moments of stress. They were the same as what the drum had played. What do you want from me? I asked, voice breaking. To play our music for the living. To call others to hear. Each soul that listens weakens the boundary further. Understanding crashed through me. This wasn't just about me or my family. If I failed, this thing would use me to lure others, to break down the walls between worlds. I thought quickly, if I agree to be your drummer, will you spare the village? My grandmother clutched my arm. Kwame, no. The entity's void face seemed to smile. If you play our rhythms willingly, we will take only what is offered. I stepped forward. Then I offer myself. The thing reached into the space where its chest should be and pulled out a drum made of materials I couldn't identify. It held it out to me. Play, it commanded. I took the drum, feeling it bond to my skin like it was merging with my flesh. I began to play, not the rhythms it expected, but the counter rhythms my grandmother had taught me as a child. Protection beats, binding patterns. The thing shrieked, a sound that shattered every glass in the house. Trickery. The old woman has taught him the sealing rhythms. My fingers flew faster than humanly possible. The drum now fully fused to my hands. Each beat drove the entity back toward the splintered remains of Okafor's Nyamengoma. My grandmother began to chant, words more ancient than our village. The thing fought, reaching into my mind with razor claws, showing me visions of power, of knowledge beyond human understanding. For a moment, I faltered. Kwame, my grandmother shouted, the final beat. You must complete the sequence. With the last of my strength, I struck the drum one final time. A sound that seemed to bend reality itself. The entity was sucked back into the shattered remains of the original drum, its inhuman screams fading to whispers. My grandmother quickly gathered the pieces, wrapping them in a cloth covered in symbols. We must take this to the grove now, while it is weakened. Together, we rushed through the darkness to the split baobab. As we approached the hollow, I could hear multitudes of drums playing from deep within the earth. A symphony of chaos trying to break free. My grandmother placed the wrapped bundle into the hollow. Your blood, she said. We need it to seal the breach. I cut my palm without hesitation, letting the blood drip onto the bundle. The drumming below intensified, then abruptly stopped as the earth seemed to swallow the remains. It is done, my grandmother sighed, for now. But as we walked back to the village, I could still feel the phantom drum against my hands, still hear faint rhythms at the edge of my consciousness. Will it ever truly be over? I asked. My grandmother looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. The drums never stopped playing, Kwame. We just learned not to listen. That was 3 months ago. I never returned to America. Instead, I became the new keeper of rhythms for our village, learning the patterns that protect us from what waits beyond. But sometimes, in the deep night, I wake to the sound of distant drumming, a calling meant only for me, and my fingers twitch with a desire to answer, to play along with that terrible symphony. So heed my warning. If you ever hear drums playing themselves in the night, do not listen too long. Block your ears. Run far away. For once the rhythm enters your blood, it never truly leaves. And the things that play those drums are always searching for new hands to join their eternal ensemble.